ritualistic child abuse.
Witchcraft. They would sacrifice animals.
Does it make you want to hate murder, or does it make you want to do murder?
Let's explore the darkness of mankind, one crime at a time.
Welcome back to Rogue Darkness, the podcast that uncovers how the misinterpretations and misinformation surrounding witchcraft, the occult, and other beliefs have led many to do unthinkable crimes. From ritualistic killings and the demons that live in all of us, to exploration of the macabre and delving deep into the unknown, let's explore the darkness of mankind, one crime at a time. I'm your host of The Grim and Gruesome, Raven. Let's go rogue and get right into today's chilling crime: the horrific torture, proposed exorcism, and unfortunate death of Joan Vollmer. So let's start off from the very beginning. On January 30th, 1993, a horrific crime took place in the small rural town of Antwerp, Victoria, Australia, causing the entire town to be filled with sheer dread and fear. A 49-year-old woman named Joan Valmer was reported to be possessed by at least 2 demons and was undergoing a treacherous exorcism which ultimately lasted a total of 4 days, leading to the unfortunate death of Joan. Religion, primarily fundamentalist Christianity, was a major part of Antwerp's small community, so hearing of Joan's death, along with the notion of possession and exorcisms taking place, instilled immense fear among the townspeople. Joan's husband, Ralph Vollmer, was reportedly the very first person to notice a change in her demeanor, where she would be awkwardly dancing and lurching outside their home while swearing loudly for all to hear. This change would not seem unusual for medical personnel, however, as it was reported that Joan had previously been admitted to a psychiatric hospital, where she was then diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia. Joan was reportedly in an unstable mental condition for many years prior to her untimely death, presumably triggered by sexual abuse she allegedly endured as a child, as well as the suicide of her first husband before she married Ralph. After first witnessing Joan acting in such an inappropriate way, Ralph reported that she was acting like a prostitute, and at various times took on the physical form of a pig and a dog, as well as the personality of a sheep shearer. Ralph later stated that there were presumed manifestations of different people and animals, according to an article in the Herald Sun. Ralph reportedly claimed that Joan had been involved in the occult ever since she was just 3 years old. Now, how he knew that or came to that conclusion is unclear, but it appears that Ralph made a lot of assumptions about his wife during their marriage, rather than looking at facts and seeking proper medical care. Joan's outlandish actions led Ralph to believe that her possible involvement in the occult potentially opened her up to possession by evil spirits, as she was slowly turning away from their traditional fundamentalist beliefs and acting more and more abnormal in the weeks leading up to her exorcism. Once Ralph came to the conclusion that he presumed his wife was possessed by demons, he first attempted to rid her of them on his own, resorting to locking her in their home's basement, as well as tying her down to the bed. These actions continuously failed, though, with Joan screaming and thrashing violently all throughout the night. After failing to overcome the presumed demons on his own, Ralph then turned to one of his neighbors, Leanne Reichenbach, along with over-the-phone guidance from a spiritual leader, Leah Klugston, on how they could rid Joan's body of the evil inhabitants. On the first day of their attempted exorcism, January 26, 1993, Ralph and Leanne began by tying Joan to a chair with her own stockings as a means to prevent her from breaking free and potentially harming them or herself. With Joan now securely tied to the chair, Ralph and Leanne stood beside her and then began an intense prayer session, their first attempt to hopefully rid her of the demons. Based on their personal observations and perceptions of what was taking place, they determined that Joan was possessed by a total of 10 demons. Throughout their exorcism session, Joan was denied any food or water, and if she attempted to close her eyes, regardless of the reasoning. They would pry them open as a means to reportedly force the demons to face the Lord and their judgment. More than likely due to deprivation, hunger, exhaustion, and her mental condition, Joan put up a violent fight trying to break free from the chair, all the while reportedly foaming from her mouth and yelling profane remarks. This just motivated Ralph to bring in more people he deemed experts on the matter to aid in Joan's exorcism. One being from their church, a 28-year-old man named David Klinger, who was a proclaimed exorcism expert, as well as Matthew Nusk, a 23-year-old proposed veteran of exorcisms. It reportedly took Matthew Nusk only a few minutes to determine what needed to be done to officially rid Joan of the demons. He sent Ralph, David, and Leanne into town to get some wrapping and olive oil to be used in their session moving forward. When they returned with the requested supplies, Nusk blessed the oil and told everyone else to douse themselves with it, while he proceeded to circle the house 7 times with the wrapping, sealing all the doors and windows within the home to prevent any new demons from entering while the exorcism took place. To make a horrifying situation even worse, Nusk then demanded that the others smash all of Joan's belongings into pieces with a sledgehammer to be sure that no demons were hiding within them. The group then also proceeded to demolish Joan's flower beds and greenhouse, which they believed could possibly be homing additional demons, and they didn't want to risk being attacked. After all this took place, in the early hours of January 30th, Nusk decided that they must try something different in order to finally exorcise the demons from Joan. He then proceeded to stand directly in front of Joan, face to face, and began demanding the demons leave her body. He started brutally slapping Joan's head with immense force, demanding the demons identify themselves. Nusk told the others there that he had finally identified who was inhabiting Joan's body, claiming it to be Legion, the master of outrage, as well as a mother and daughter named Princess Joan and Princess Baby Joan. Nusk then reportedly claimed that in order to eradicate the demons from Joan's body, it was required that they beat them from her. By 4 p.m. on January 30th, the group began to forcibly attempt to remove the assumed demons from Joan's body by aggressively squeezing and pushing them out of her, starting down by her womb and working their way up to her head. This harmful form of proposed exorcism is what ultimately led to Joan's unfortunate death. Due to the immense pressure, strain, and forcefulness that the group put on Joan's body, by repeatedly pummeling, kicking, and crushing her body, Joan ended up having a heart attack during the torture, and soon thereafter, she passed away. Surprisingly though, Ralph, along with the others there, were not even distraught by Joan's passing. Instead, they were reportedly comforted and reassured that they had finally rid her body of the demons. They had even stood around her body with their Bibles in hand, praying and giving thanks to their God for freeing her soul from its possession of evil. They reportedly believed that her body would soon be resurrected by their Lord, renewed and restored to her normal self. And Ralph was even reported telling news outlets and the media that he believed she would be resurrected at her funeral, and that everyone should be there to witness the miraculous event. The authorities weren't notified of Joan's death until about 48 hours after her determined death. All the while, her body had started decomposing due to the heat, which was reported to be around 40 degrees Celsius at the time the authorities arrived, which would have been around 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite it being January, in Australia, that's the middle of their summer, so we can only imagine how ghastly of a scene the authorities were greeted with upon her body's discovery. An autopsy on Joan's body later indicated that the pressure inflicted on her neck had escalated the likelihood of her having the heart attack, as her thyroid cartilage had reportedly been fractured. After being taken into custody, Ralph Vollmer, Leanne Reichenbach, David Klinger, and Matthew Nusk were all found guilty of manslaughter after a lengthy trial had taken place. Since Leah Kluckson had only provided minuscule guidance over the phone, she was never tied into the charges. Ralph Vollmer was ultimately convicted of false imprisonment and reckless injury and received a suspended sentence while also not having to serve any jail time. Despite their open and incriminating confessions, out of the group, Leanne Reichenbach ultimately received the heaviest sentence, which was a mere 4 months in prison for manslaughter and also false imprisonment. David Klinger was sentenced to 3 months in prison for the same charges, while Matthew Nusk was found guilty of false imprisonment and received a suspended sentence. All of them walk free to this day. So that was the equally horrifying and heartbreaking case of Joan Vollmer and how her deteriorated mental state due to depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia was mistaken for demonic possession, leading to her unfortunate torture and demise. The moral of this disturbing story is, a life was brutally lost due to the negligence, extremist beliefs, misguidance, and trust in a practice that could have easily been overridden if the proper psychological intervention and aid was sought. It was reported that Ralph Vollmer had ultimately blamed the psychiatric hospital that Joan had previously been released from, stating that they released her too soon, and that had she stayed in the hospital like she should have in his eyes, she likely would have never faced such a devastating fate. Let that one sink in. So let me know your thoughts on this case, and if you have any questions or suggestions regarding it, or any other cases I've covered, feel free to contact me at roguedarknesspod@gmail.com. You can also reach me directly on Instagram or Twitter at rogue_darkness. I'm always interested in hearing your thoughts on cases I've covered, as well as hear any suggestions you may have for future ones. All the links to the articles referenced in this episode, as well as any past ones, as well as my socials and contact information, are all down below for your reference. And if you like what you hear on Rogue Darkness, please consider sharing this podcast with your family and friends, or on social media, and also by leaving a rating and review on Apple iTunes or any other platform where you can leave a review. It's definitely a great way to help the show out and to get it more noticed. And as I like to mention in the episodes, I do have a Ko-fi page set up, so if you ever want to check it out or to submit a donation to help the show keep going, the link is down below in the description. Any support on there is always greatly appreciated, but it's never expected. And with that said, that concludes this week's episode of Rogue Darkness. The darkness is all around us, and I can confidently say that reality truly is more terrifying than fiction. Until next time.